Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Nature from North Star Games. Nature is a 1 to 4 player game that plays in 30 to 45 minutes, although that is a very situational range. We'll talk about that soon. This is based on the Evolution series, which has gone through a long degree of, well, evolution, pun actually intended that time. We have Nature over here. We have the original Evolution. Well, there's the original Evolution before we even got to North Star. North Star put out Evolution. They then put out Evolution Climate. They put out Oceans, which is again is a take on that genre. And now they have Nature, which is the newest take on the whole entire Evolution genre. And in my opinion, the best one so far, but I'll explain why. Before we do though, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. I should say this is a prototype, but I don't like, it almost feels like it isn't. The components here are incredible, it feels like a final production. Let's say it's a prototype, just in case. Let's say it's a prototype. They got inserts, they got wooden tokens, they got everything looking one of the best prototypes I've ever seen, if it is indeed a prototype. But we're going to stick with that just in case. But that said, Nature is basically going to be evolving on the Evolution gameplay. I'm going to kind of walk you through, let's do a general overview of how the game works, walk you through the basics, walk you through the modules, tell you my thoughts and opinions, timestamps to everything down below. The general idea of the game is across 4 rounds of play, in the base game that is, you'll be trying to build out various species. Every single round you're going to go ahead and add a new species, and then from there you're going to be drawing cards from the selection of cards that are in play, starting with the base deck. These are module decks that I have in play, but ignore these for right now. You'll draw cards from the base deck, and then you're going to use those cards to grow your populations, to increase your population, to increase the size of your population, to play the cards to go ahead and add those traits to your species, as well as possibly discarding those cards to add more food to the watering hole so that your species can stay alive eating all the food. You're basically going to have new species and be trying to make those species better so you can do better than the other players, because whenever you eat, you're going to go ahead and gain that food as points. So trying to build a stronger, better, larger population that has all these traits in their advantage, that's going to be something that helps you try to win the game. You're going to do that across 4 rounds of play, see who has the most food, and that's mostly going to be the main way you get points. There's points for other things as well. There's points for bananas if you're playing with the rainforest module. There's points for remaining populations, all these other points. But the general idea is you want to go ahead and grow populations, build them up, and eat as much food as possible across 4 rounds of play. Now I'm going to walk you through that in a bit more detail over here. You're going to go ahead and start each round by adding a new population marker. Let me see if I can find one over here for a size 1 population. We're going to grab a size 1 population. You put it into play, and then we're going to go ahead and grab some tokens over here, put some population tokens into play. You're going to go ahead and grab your cards, so you're going to choose 5 cards each round. We're drawing only from the base deck right now, because in the base game, you would draw only from the base deck. And you're going to go ahead and add food to the watering hole, because the food, based on the player count, you're going to add food, and you're going to have food available for players to go ahead and eat with their populations. From there, players are going to go ahead and take turns discarding cards to go ahead and do any number of things, to possibly increase their population, to possibly grow their population, adding more population tokens to their population, and then possibly to play traits over here. So for example, if I play social to this population over here, this particular species will get +2 food when eating food in the game. So you're trying to add these various populations, various traits, and discard cards in order to do as much as possible in the game, possibly discarding cards to go ahead and add more food to the watering hole as well. And you're trying to basically manage and get the most out of the 5 cards that you play. Now when you gather these cards, it's going to be a large combination of cards. Fortunately, the game has great play rates to kind of walk you through all the possible cards you have over here. So you can see over here, we have a general structure of the the turn order for the basic player aid, as well as the various cards you have. But cards are usually going to be a combination of 3 main things. Kind of broken into 3 main things. You'll have things that help your populations possibly get more food or do things like that to get more food into your population, or to have abilities that might make them grow faster or do different things like that. You're going to have various traits that are going to be more predatory in nature, ways to go ahead and eat other populations, because at first it starts off very peaceful. You're just trying to work with a limited amount of food in the watering hole, trying to add those foods to your populations, because as you feed, you can start adding food to your populations and then treat those as fed populations, which will then earn those points going into your personal bag over there and earning you points in the game. But finding a way to possibly start eating other players, that will help you get more food and also mean that you're not fighting over the watering hole, rather you're fighting over trying to eat the animals that have already well fed from the watering hole. So your next combination of cards is going to be cards that make you a bigger and better and worse predator in the game. And then the last kinds of cards are going to be cards that are more defensive in nature. Because there are predators, there are going to be cards that help you avoid predators. Various cards like from Fast, which we already saw over here, Fast over here can only be hunted by species with as many fast traits. So you can pay these traits to your species to try to make them faster than other species, making them get away from other chasing predator species. Although you are limited to 3 species, to 3 traits per species that you have in play, so trying to juggle the combination of traits that will help you be stronger at getting food, help you be a stronger predator, or help you avoid predators, or possibly traits that give you the tools as a predator to get past the things that the other players are playing defensively, that's going to be what you're trying to do with your 5 cards. So basically, every single round, you're going to add a new population, which means you are going to be managing more and more populations as the game goes on. So you want to try to be mindful as to how you're going to split those 5 cards. In round 1, it's all for that one species. But as the rounds progress, you're trying to split those cards amongst more and more species, which makes it more of a challenge to juggle. You're going to do that as well as possible across the 4 rounds of play, see who wins the game. But then we have modules. Modules are going to do a few different things. First of all, they're going to add new decks of cards. Each module is going to add something new. We'll walk you through at the end of the review, I'll talk about what each module does, but each module will add a new deck of cards to the game. It's also going to extend the game length. If you have one module in the game, it's going to make it a 5-round game instead of a 4-round game. Plus adding those cards, that gives you more things to consider. If you're playing a 2-module game, it's going to be 6 rounds of play instead of 4, so you're going from 4 to 5 to 6 rounds of play for 1 or 2 modules. I believe you can go ahead and introduce as many modules as you want, but in general the recommendation is to stick to 1 or 2 modules. My personal recommendation would be 2 modules because to me, the combinations of the modules are going to be the thing that adds the most variability to the game experience. But modules are going to go ahead and give you something new, asset or facets to the game, we'll talk loosely about them soon, as well as extending the game length and the game options. And that's basically what nature is doing over here. As far as the modules, the base game over here is going to come with 5 modules. We're going to have Flight, Arctic Tundra, Jurassic, Rainforest, and Natural Disasters. You're going to have those 5 modules, and they all do slightly different things. Natural disasters are going to add disaster cards to the mix. These are not going to add a standard deck of cards, but rather we're adding all these disasters that are going to come into play, affecting all the populations in the game, and you're trying to juggle how to avoid or mitigate around those as much as possible. Jurassic is going to add larger creatures. Normally populations cap out at size 4. Jurassic is going to add this entire new box of giant tokens to store all the way up to a size 8 populations, growing your population stronger and larger, and possibly benefiting from size 8 populations if you take advantage of them. Then you're going to have Rainforest. Rainforest is going to help your populations grow faster in terms of the species size. So while Jurassic is helping them grow larger, and you also grow them size 2 at a time, and when you come to Rainforest, you're going to be able to grow your populations out further, but it also introduces hidden traits. So your traits are only going to be revealed as you choose to, which totally changes up the way the game plays, and makes it so you don't really know what's hiding in the forest, for better or for worse. Then you're going to have Arctic Tundra, which is kind of the aggressively mean one of the bunch. Everything is harder in Arctic Tundra. You have less food, you have less opportunity to grow your population, everything is just harder, more repressed, but the flip side is you do have that entire deck of cards that will help you get past that winter. So you are trying to balance a harsher environment overall, while knowing you can draw cards from that deck that might help your species adapt as much as possible to the cold. And then lastly, you have Flight. Flight's going to add birds. It adds an entirely new species type. You can grow size 1 or 2 birds, and yes, it does combine with Jurassic to grow size 4 birds, which you usually can't do. And it's also going to add the migration aspect, where your birds can kind of retreat during the feeding phase, for better or for worse, giving you a whole little puzzle as trying to make them safer, but also make sure you still benefit from feeding your various species as you get through the game. And then they won't score points as well, whatever, I don't want to get too lost in the details. Anyways, that's basically the 5 modules that are going to be in the game. The way you mix and match those modules is going to be a drastically different experience. The base game of nature as is going to be a pretty vanilla, straightforward experience, although vanilla might be an unfair term. I've just played Evolution enough as a game, the original Evolution, and then variants of Evolution, and then Oceans, and now Nature, that to me, the base game of Nature is a little bit more straightforward as far as doing, but as you add various modules, you're going to have a lot more things happening, and as you combine various modules, you're really going to have completely different experiences. Playing with Rainforest and Jurassic is going to be a drastically different experience compared to playing with Arctic Forest and Jurassic. They both introduce new elements, but the way those elements combine is going to give you a totally different experience, which is a good time to transition into my review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play on this game is pretty straightforward, although I should note I am coming into this game knowing the overall system. So as much as I say it's pretty straightforward, I've played iterations of Evolution enough times that it was pretty straightforward to me. It may not be as straightforward to you, so I have to go back to way back when I first played Evolution, the original game, and try to remember how difficult it was. Overall, I found the base game fairly straightforward. The modules themselves all have their own individual rulebooks that are all 2 pages, very easy to get up and running. So I didn't find this game overly complicated to learn or get through. The play rates are absolutely fantastic. They have little play rates for every single module in the game, so you can hand out all the Arctic Tundra play rates, which will give players a list of the cars in the module, so they can go ahead and know what to expect, what to be trying to root for, and how to work with those cards, which is really essential. We're going to come back to that. Game time, I do find the boxes fairly accurate. You can get a base game of nature in, I mean, half an hour might be aggressive, maybe at a 2-player game when both players know it, but you can get a base game of nature in 45 minutes easily. And then as far as the modules can easily boost it up to that 90-minute playtime. I have not gone beyond 2 modules. I've played base nature, I've played nature with single modules, and I've played nature with a combination of 2 modules. I have not tried getting past 2 modules to anything more complicated. It's doable, I just haven't felt the need to do so yet. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the modular nature of the gameplay. Because, and to me, this is a tricky one to review because I've played, like I said already, I've played multiple versions of Evolution, both from Northstar as well as from other companies, and so I'm very familiar with the overall system at play and how it works. And so to me, the biggest thing about this, it's hard to review nature in a vacuum for me because I'm coming at it from knowing the system. Let's try to focus on what this base game does well. The general base game of nature is a rewarding system of almost rock, paper, scissors like gameplay, where you're trying to go ahead and gather various species and try to protect yourself and or be the aggressor, knowing full well that players are constantly adapting to what's going on. And there's a little puzzle of trying to read your opponent and how they're trying to build out their species. There is a fun aspect of watching the turn order, watching which cards go to building up their population, watch which ones grow the population, and watching how they're playing cards to adapt. You have the opportunity to go ahead and add cards to species. Even fully stocked species, you can add more cards to them, replacing previous traits to go ahead and figure out the right combination to adapt either as a predator or as prey, constantly trying to adapt to that slight rock, paper, scissors like gameplay where everything you do has an impact and everything you do has a way that it can be a threat or can be a benefit or can be a defense in the game. The overall the overall basis of nature is a compelling puzzle of trying to build out species, manage their food intake across several rounds, and I find the game isn't as punishing as you might think. Despite having the capacity for predators in this game, nonetheless, usually, and it does change based on the modules you're playing, but when your species get eaten, you do get to go ahead and recycle those towards your next species next round, so there is a cost, but it's not as bad as simply being eaten. And often the benefit for eating someone is not as bad as the cost of being eaten. The nature of the size of your population, a size 4 population, can count as 4 food for a single predator, and you only lost 1 thing, which means even though there is a take that element, it is usually far more helpful to the person being the predator than it is damaging to the person being the prey. That combined with the overall puzzle means you are constantly on your toes, but it's not an overall punishing experience. It is more of a rewarding experience with that edge of just being mindful of what you're losing or what you're prepared to lose as you build out your population in different ways. The modules, though. The modules are really where nature is going to shine. If you have played Evolution in the past, and well, I'd say if you didn't enjoy Evolution in general, I don't know if nature will drastically change your mind, but if in any capacity or any way you liked Evolution or any version thereof, I think nature is the best version of that system because of the modularity of it, because of the fact that you are able to adapt different cards into play, and every round players get to choose which decks to draw their cards from, and which ways to try to build out their species, and there is so much to consider, especially the more you add things, and the combinations really change up the gameplay drastically. Again, my personal favorite so far, and I have not tried all the combinations by any means, but my personal favorite so far is Jurassic combined with Rainforest. Something about having larger, scarier, more dangerous creatures with the Thagomizer die, I think it's a Thagomizer die, when you have all those things, but then you have the combination of the hidden element of the Rainforest where things are being turned up as you go when players want to take advantage of those defenses. That really changes the entire way you play the game. I mean, they all change the way you play the game, but that's really compelling. It's why I have this set up over here. So far, this has been my favorite combination, but there are a lot of fun combinations. I would say I'm someone who doesn't even like it when games limit you. So like Arctic Tundra tends to be the most restrictive as far as your populations. I usually like it when games give you more, not less, but something about the way nature works makes even that a fun experience for me because you are able to try to draw and adapt, and all players are under the same restrictions. So if you want a really harsh game, combine our Arctic Tundra with natural disasters and watch everything fall apart apart around you while you try to do your best possible job to survive and possibly thrive. A nice quality of life change from the original games is the fact that you can always go Predator. You don't need a Predator trait. You can always go ahead and just take a Predator trait, which means you're never stuck with a bad hand of things that won't really work for you in the game. You are going to be able to go ahead and make use of things. The question is, are you using it to grow your population, expand your population, or are you using it for the trait itself? And it all gives you a fun puzzle. And as the game goes on, you can't keep up with your species, which is a good thing, meaning you only have a certain number of cards you're drawing every round, and as you add more and more species, you have to more carefully decide where those go, which means usually the game evolution is going to be a state of growing a single strong species and then finding ways to try to grow other species while trying to play a desperate game of catch up, not fully being able to catch up, which is good because it means that as a player is doing better, as a player has a full competent species, as they're not being eaten, they are going to have to go ahead and spread themselves out more in the game, versus players who have gotten picked on a bit more are a little bit able to more strictly concentrate on developing their singular species. And I think I mentioned this already, but I love the player aids. The fact that they have different player aids for every single module in the game, the fact that they're so crisp and clear as far as what cards are available, so you can at a glance look at them without broadcasting your intent by having to go through decks or look at things too carefully. The player aids really are a strong quality of life adjustment, specifically because now we're going to move into the things I don't like about the game, which the first thing is that even with the player aids, and the player aids help a lot in this, even with the player aids, this is a game that will definitely reward players who know the system better than other players. And don't get me wrong, all games should do that to an extent. If I've played this game multiple times and you haven't, I should be better at the game. I've been exposed to it. That is a good thing in general. I think the gap in Nature is a stronger gap. Someone who's played Nature 3 or 4 times versus someone who has played it not at all, that player is coming in at a major advantage because they have a good idea of the rock, paper, scissors dynamic of the gameplay. And there is a rock, paper, scissors dynamic as far as, again, how you're going to build your species, get stronger, go aggressive, get defensive, overcome the defensive. You're going to have a little bit of an arc of how everything works in tandem with each other, and knowing the options that are at your disposal will really give you a leg up. Now again, the player aids do help a lot. They are so good. If not for the fact that there are player aids, this would be a bigger complaint for me. It still is a complaint. Someone who knows Nature well, someone who's played this game a bunch, is going to be walking in much more fully prepared against somebody who has not played it at all. Now that still can be mitigated or managed around, especially because in this game, at higher player counts, you will have a small degree of picking on the leader. I say small degree because ultimately if you have a properly defensive species in play, you won't necessarily be attacked. But when there are opportunities to ping at that other player instead of somebody else, there is a little bit of target the leader. Not enough that it's punishing to be the leader, but just enough that it's a little bit of a compensating factor. But the other complaint is going to be at a 2-player game. Nature is a game that can start rewarding the player who has gotten the player who has started to build up their species more effectively early on. Without that balance of additional player counts chipping away a little bit, a 2-player game can slowly turn into the rich gets richer, which, especially if you're playing a full 90-minute long game, can be something that's a bit more frustrating if you care about that discrepancy as you go through it. And then again, combined with that potential skill imbalance, can be more of an issue. These are not major complaints, they're just things to be mindful as you go. And at the end of the day, I will say that I've said this about evolution in the past, and I'll say it about Nature. There is a rock, paper, scissors dynamic at play. I still think this is the best version of the game system, but ultimately a lot of it is trying to get this thing to do the good thing, get that thing to stop your opponent, get that thing to get past your opponent. That cycle is in play, which makes it a little bit, even as you spread into different modules, you're still going to have that kind of aspect of this helps with this counters this counters that is going to be in play in the game. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, this could feel like a mean game. I've said it doesn't bother me that much because of the nature of how very often when you are being a predator in the game, the amount you benefit is not as much as the amount somebody else hurts, so there is that kind of imbalance in a good way in play, so I can eat one of your species and it benefits me much more than it hurts you, and so it means that it's not that punishing. And then again, in most modules, you're going to go ahead and get things back anyways to be able to reinvest into new species, so it's usually not that big a deal. But at the end of the day, even though the math of it kind of works out, sometimes having your species eaten cannot be fun, and if you don't like that aspect, this is a game where players are going to eventually eat your species, and there's not a lot you can do about it. And then the other thing I'll note is that there is definitely still randomness in the card draw. Every single round you have the opportunity to draw from whichever decks you think are going to help you the most, but even though you have that control, you don't have a control over what's coming out, and it can be totally different. You can get a bunch of traits that are great for being a predator, and that may not be your vibe. You may not want to be a predator, that might just not be the way you want to play the game. Or you may get cards that you're hoping will be defensive, and you might just not get them. There's still 100% is luck of the draw. Knowing what's out there helps, and over the course of a game, things will work out enough, but at any given point, you just may not get the kinds of things you were hoping to get, and obviously you shouldn't be able to draw an exact card, but sometimes you just won't have a hand of cards that is as useful. And again, there's things that mitigate the fact that you can discard cards to increase your population or grow in size. That means you always have ways to get rid of cards that don't suit your strategy, but if you have an entire hand of cards that don't suit your strategy, then you have less agency as what to do with that. As far as final thoughts on nature over here, I've been playing, like I said already, Evolution. I want to say since 2012, I think I played the original Evolution. I played Evolution Climate, I've played the app, I've played Oceans, I've played Evolution, what's it called? Oh my gosh. Evolution and New World. I think it's called Evolution and New World from a different company entirely, all built on the same structure. And so I've had a lot of time with this core system, but now I've been playing Nature, and Nature is easily my favorite of that structure because of the modularity of it, because of the way that for me, because Evolution and Nature and Oceans, because they all rely on a slightly rock, paper, scissors dynamic, over enough plays is the kind of game where sometimes you feel, okay, great, I've seen how these things interact, and now I'm good. I'm good with that. I've gotten to experience that. And while that point may come for Nature, I do know that they plan on releasing modules in the future, but more importantly, what I find the most compelling thing about this game is the way different things combine, the way that as you're playing the game, you can try to decide what kind of game experience you want to have, and or mix and match things in ways you've never done so before. There's already a decent amount of ways you can do that with the base game. You can play Evolution, you can play Nature, you can play Nature with any of the 5 modules. That's already 6 games right there. And then you can start mixing and matching. I don't know the exact math on it, but even if you only go with 2 modules, what is that? Your first one's going to be 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. Is that what the math is? So it's another 10. So you have, what, 16 different combinations? I think that's roughly the math. You have 16 different combinations of the ways to play this game, only going up to 0, 1, or 2 modules, which is a lot of ways to play this game, and each one will give you a different experience, and obviously the math on that will get crazy strong as you start going to 3 modules, or as you start adding more expansion modules to the game. So to me, this is a game that is built on a system that has already been tried and tested and proven, and been in the gaming space for over a decade now, and it goes from there and it takes it and makes it modular, variable, and to that end makes it the best version of the Nature game so far. So for me, it's still not a perfect game, but it is the best version of the system, and it's one that I very much enjoy. It's a 4 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, if you want a game that's going to have you building out your creatures in a much more accessible, fun, light gameplay, check out King of Tokyo, where you're going to start with a monster, and then slowly be able to grow it as you roll dice in a very Yahtzee-style approach. And if you want a way to build things out and develop things in a way that is much, much more intense, and also a cooperatively themed, I guess, or cooperative as a game, check out Spirit Island, where again you'll start with a spirit, and then be able to grow and develop that spirit to be stronger and stronger as you take out the invaders from the island. All 3 of these games have a way of building out and evolving creatures on the light, medium, and heavy end of the spectrum. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.